Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I really appreciate you being with me. This is December, let me see, 15th, 16th, 17th, December the 17th. You've only got 14 days left to take advantage of my December 2024 two-book special and save yourself almost $20 and get a wealth of material. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com, and order those two books. And believe me, you'll be glad you did. Listen, these books have been called life-changing. They have been called world-changing by different readers. So, yeah, they may rattle your cage. The material that's in it certainly rattled my cage, I can tell you that. Okay, so back to it. Once again, happy Tuesday morning. So, yesterday, I spoke to you about what I call the greatest theological anachronism that has ever been committed. And here's what I mean by that. When people read about the end of the age in the Bible, they automatically transfer that statement about the end of the age. Whoops, boy, I hope you could hear that. Sorry about that. They automatically transfer that language about the end of the age to the current age. And so they go to Matthew chapter 13, and by the way, we're getting back to that. I haven't finished dealing with the linguistics of the end of the age. So I'm going to get back to it, but I really wanted to focus on the question of the end of what age? Jesus said harvest is at the end of the age. What age was he talking about? Well, once again, it is normally, commentators go, well, Jesus was talking about the end of the current age. Well, he was talking about the current age, but it was the then present his age, not the end of the Christian age, which had not even been established. Are we supposed to believe, ladies and gentlemen, that here is Jesus living literally in the last generation of the Mosaic age, and in his discussion of the end of the age, he ignores that impending consummation to project himself, to project the discussion so far 2,000 years into the future. Is that what we're supposed to believe? Well, that's what I taught for years. Yes, I believe that. But it slowly began to dawn on me, wait a minute, that's anachronistic. Why would Jesus completely and totally ignore the end of the age in which he was living, the end of the age that was the very life, the very identity of his own people, Israel and the Jews, and treat it as if it was of no consequence? This is especially significant, ladies and gentlemen, in light of the Transfiguration. I just love this subject. What happened in the Mount of Transfiguration? Well, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John, some say Andrew, up on the mount. And there, Jesus is transfigured. Incredibly, marvelously, wonderfully. His face shined like the sun. His clothes shined whiter than any fuller soap. Any soap could ever get them white. And there, appearing with him was Moses and Elijah. Well, guess what? Virtually every commentator who has ever gone into the symbolism and significance of the appearing of Moses and Elijah have said they represent the law and the prophets. Well, yes, they do. They did. Peter is overwhelmed. Said, Lord, it's great for us to be here. Let us build here 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. But even as he spoke, Moses and Elijah disappeared. They faded away. And only Jesus in his resplendent glory was left standing there by himself in that glory. And the voice from heaven, the Bat Kol, said, This is emphatic, is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Him, and in the Greek this is in the emphatic mode, him here. Oh, wait a minute. What about Moses and Elijah? They're the great representatives of the Old Covenant. Moses gave them the law. Elijah was the greatest of all the prophets. They faded away. Jesus is identified emphatically as the one to be heard. Folks, this is a vision, and yes, Matthew 17:10 and following says the Transfiguration was a vision. Doesn't mean it wasn't real. Doesn't suggest that. Doesn't hint at that. It was a vision. It's something they saw. Peter, in 2 Peter chapter 1 and 16, tells us that the Transfiguration was a vision of Christ's Parousia. Okay, now wait a minute. You got to catch this. This is incredible. The Transfiguration was a vision of the second coming of Christ, i.e. the Parousia. But the Transfiguration was a vision of the passing of the glory of Moses and Elijah and the transcendent ascension of the glory of Christ and thus his new covenant world, his new covenant creation. Folks, don't you think that if the Transfiguration was a vision of the Parousia of Christ, and that's emphatically what it's called, and don't you think that if it was a vision of the end of the Christian age, the end of the new covenant age, and Jesus said, Matthew chapter 24, verse 35, heaven and earth shall pass away, my words will never pass away. Don't you think that if the Transfiguration was a vision, since it's a vision of the Parousia of Christ, if then the Parousia of Christ is an earth-burning, time-ending event in which literal heaven and earth, passing of heaven and earth, if it was a passing of the literal physical heaven and earth, don't you think the vision would have included something about the dissolution of creation? Well, it did envision the passing of creation, but it was the passing of the old covenant creation. As I pointed out, Hebrews chapter 9, verse 11, calls the temple and the cultus, the old covenant world, quote, this creation, unquote. So let me pose that question again to you. Let me ask that you give it some really, really serious thought. Since the Transfiguration was a vision of the second coming of Christ, then if the second coming of Christ is the end of literal physical heaven and earth, why is it that the Transfiguration does not mention one single word about the passing of literal physical heaven and earth. And some might say, well, Preston, you're arguing based upon missing words. Okay, then let's shift gears. In the context, because of what the text does describe, if what it describes would demand the passing of literal physical heaven and earth, then that's fine. We don't have to have the specific words. Okay? If, however, what is described is a rejection of, a denial of the passing of literal physical heaven and earth, then guess what? We can exclude the passing of heaven and earth, literal physical heaven and earth, from the Transfiguration. So, when the Transfiguration was a vision of covenant transformation, not a transformation from a literal physical heaven and earth to a literal physical heaven and earth. No. It was a vision of the old covenant creation and the coming of the new covenant creation. In other words, it was a passing of the end of the age. It was a vision of the end of the age, the end of the old covenant age, and the bringing in of the new covenant age. Folks, do you see the power of this? This is absolutely incredible. And yet, as I've already pointed out, when commentators go to the New Testament and they see there the discussion of the end of the age, Matthew 13, 39 and 40, Matthew chapter 24 and verse 3, Hebrews 9, 26, which we'll get to tomorrow. They see these passages and they say, oh, look, Jesus is talking about, Hebrews is talking about the end of the Christian age. And, pardon me, they completely overlook, not through dishonesty, I'm not suggesting that, but they completely overlook the very nature of the two ages. They completely overlook the nature of the two creations. They completely overlook the Transfiguration and the fact that it was a vision of the second coming, and yet it was a vision of the passing of the old covenant glory of Moses and Elijah and the transcendent, ascending glory of Christ and his new covenant. Now, folks, you cannot posit the end of the age as the end of the new covenant age without imposing the Transfiguration onto the end of the Christian age, violating the very nature and the very definition of the Transfiguration. As the end of the old covenant glory, it was not a vision of the coming end of the new covenant glory. Do you catch the power of this? So when I pose the question, Succot and the end of what age, I am suggesting and I am proposing, I'm even insisting that we conflate the idea that Succot was predictive of the end of the old covenant age and the ushering in of the unending new covenant age, and that we see Succot in that light, not as indicative in any way, shape, form, or fashion of the end of the endless Christian age, new covenant age, messianic age. It just doesn't work. Okay, I'm out of time. Thanks for joining me. I will see you on the flip side.